Hey there everybody, Travis Bowman here. I'm a fingerstyle guitar player and retro video game nerd. Let's talk about one of my favorite consoles of all time, the Sega Dreamcast. So what we have today are a list of Dreamcast games that you might not have heard of before, and if you haven't heard of them and have any interest in the console, you should probably give these games a go. But just a heads up, we're not going to be covering the ones that have already been covered a bajillion times before, like Sonic Adventure and Crazy Taxi. These are some of the games that are a little more obscure that you might not have heard about. The Dreamcast is by far my favorite system of all time, and it's because it really has that nice Sega arcadey feel, and I think that is going to be reflected in this video quite a bit. First up on the list is a game called Phantasy Star Online. This is the very first console MMORPG ever made. There are a ton of different characters and playstyles to choose from, but the main three types deal with melee weapons, handguns and rifles, or a force character. The force character deals in mostly magic, such as lightning, fire, ice, etc., but they're also an integral part of the team due to their healing abilities. These characters also have an ability to buff team attacks and defense, as well as lower enemy attacks and defense. You'll want one of these guys on your team if you die. They're support characters of the game, and they can revive you, and if everybody on the team dies, it's game over. My personal favorite are the melee style characters, but I've played this game using all different types in the last 20 years. The game has a very rhythmic style to attacking, and you can do 3 attacks in a row, but only if they're timed correctly. It's kind of hard to describe, but if you've ever played the game, I bet you know exactly what I'm talking about. A common misconception about this game is the fact that since it's so old, you can't really play it online anymore, and that's absolutely not true. Private servers are still going to this day, and you'd be surprised just how many people still play it. It's got kind of a cult following these days. I turned on this game to capture some footage for this video, and I was really surprised to find an entire squad of players actually in the game, and this was really surprising considering that it was a Wednesday night. You're seeing me reboot the game here because I didn't initially have my Dreamcast keyboard plugged in. I turned the console off and rebooted with the keyboard plugged in so I could communicate. There was no voice chat in PSO back in the day, but nowadays people either choose to still talk with the keyboard or jump in a Discord server. I've been playing this game off and on since its release, and I've never had a bad time with it, not even once. I mean, it's dated a little bit nowadays, but it's still a lot of fun if you like grindy games. The best part about this game still being online are the other players. If you start brand new, it likely won't take you long before you run into a high level player that will help you gain some levels and even gift you some weapons and armor. You know, it's really hard to believe that we're talking about a 24-year-old game here, but hey, those Dreamcast fans are passionate like no other. So if this game looks like a good time to you, and it probably does, I'm sure you're wanting to know how to get online so you can join the fun, right? Well, getting online with a real Sega Dreamcast can be a little problematic. I purchased a device called the Dream Pi several years ago, and all that is a Raspberry Pi computer designed to communicate with the Dreamcast modem. It's basically like the middleman between that modem on the Dreamcast and the broadband connection with your router. You can get a Wi-Fi capable model or just go in hardwired via Ethernet. Now the problem is these Dream Pi units often are out of stock lately, and a buddy of mine has been waiting for one of these for quite some time, so when they are in stock they're about $100 or so. I think there's a guide online that will show you how to make your own, or you can spend a ton of money on the ultra rare broadband adapter for the Sega Dreamcast. However, amazingly, you can still play this game with Dreamcast users on your computer, and I won't lie, the process to get the game running on the PC is a real pain in the ass, but once you get it set up, it's actually a lot of fun, and that's how my friends play this game with me. Yeah, I could just play it on the PC, but I'd rather play it on the Dreamcast, mostly because I can. I mean, seriously, man, I love doing stuff like this if it's still possible, and it is still possible to play Phantasy Star Online. It's really cool. Yeah, you can still play the game offline if you really want to on your Dreamcast, and the grindy fun stuff is still there, but honestly, man, the real meat and potatoes is with the full squad. There's just a ton more experience and items to be gained that way, and once you play it online, it can be really tough to go back. Phantasy Star Online is by far the best RPG on the Sega Dreamcast. Jet Grind Radio is one of my favorite games of all time, and for quite some time it was a Dreamcast exclusive, but nowadays you can get this game on Steam for pretty cheap. This is one of the first games I ever got for my Dreamcast back in the day, and this copy is one of the few games that I've kept in my collection from way back then, and I'm never gonna sell it. This game is a single-player adventure, and honestly I think it's a masterpiece. The object is to skate around a small arena, paint graffiti on specific targets, and don't get killed by the police in the process. Later on, there's a lot more objectives and optional missions like racing other players to unlock them as playable characters. The game gets kind of tough and crazy after they start sending Apache helicopters and tanks after you. Think of it as a slightly more extreme Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, but with vandalism. I've always really loved the cel-shaded graphics in this one. The game is super pretty as a result. I mean, I really like this era of color and bright stuff right before everything got all brown and gray in the PlayStation 3 era. There are a ton of unlockable characters in this game, and each of them have their own attributes and power, technique, and graffiti skills. This game has massive replayability based on all of those characters. You know, I've tried them all over the years, but Garam is definitely my favorite by far. The dude is dressed like a frickin' alien, and I like his shorts, and he's just a cool guy. Painting graffiti can be as simple as pressing the left trigger or as complicated as having to input several combinations of analog stick movements to get the job done. The level of difficulty for spraying graffiti depends on the character, and some of them are much easier to do than others. The story is very unique. You're in a rollerblading gang called the GGs, and there are several other gangs in the area fighting for control over painting the entire city of Tokyo-to. Once you clear a few stages in the area, you get to take on the enemy gang for the right to make their area your area. It's a really fun, mostly linear story that doesn't really get old, and at the beginning you have the choice to take on 3 different gangs in any order that you want. DJ Professor K narrates this entire experience, and the game has a certain level of charm that really kind of ages like a fine wine. The story takes on a rather strange turn at the end of the game, but I'm not going to spoil it. It's weird. It gets really weird, but this is definitely classic Sega at play here. The music is mostly composed by the legend Hideki Naganuma, and I'm not embarrassed to admit that I often listen to this soundtrack in my car. The music fits the game so well, and honestly, it just would not be the same without it. A lot of people have a certain video game that's very special to them, and I think that perfectly describes this game for me. I've beaten it several times now, and I often go back to it to play it again about once a year, and if you own a Sega Dreamcast, honestly, you owe it to yourself to play this game.
Nice.
The Dreamcast had a ton of different games of all sorts of different genres, but it was really blessed with an impressive lineup of arcadey sports games, and Virtua Tennis is by far my favorite on that list. This game had an impressive roster of real-life players from the early 2000s, and Sega even added more fake players to kind of spice it up a little bit. Every character has a defining attribute such as a powerful serve or a strong forehand or a fast running trait. You'll unlock several characters just by playing the game, and honestly, I really miss that about this generation. Do you remember when you got rewarded for playing the game that you paid for? This game is unbelievably simple, but it's a lot more challenging than it looks. You only have 2 buttons to worry about, and that's your simple shot button and the lob button. No slicing, topspin, or flat shot variants like other modern tennis games have, but you know, this one is pure arcade action, and I really like tennis simulation games too, but Virtua Tennis it's pure arcade perfection that I really can't deny. It's amazingly fun. I know most people don't care for tennis, and that's fine, but you gotta at least try this one before you write it off. Sure, it's really tough, but it's really not unfair. The movements and controls are spot on, and they're not too laggy or floaty. If you miss the shot, it's because you weren't in position fast enough. Movement and positioning is key in this game, and the same can be said about pretty much every other tennis game as well as tennis in real life. There's a ton of characters that suit different play styles, such as like a defensive baseline player or an all-out serve and volley style player. You can play through the arcade mode, but the real meat is in the World Tour mode, and that's where you're going to earn the money to unlock all the characters and the outfits and the tennis courts that you can play on in the game. If you beat the arcade mode without losing a game, then Morgan Freeman himself comes out to challenge you. This dude is your practice coach in the World Tour mode, and it's crazy that you have to beat him to truly beat the game. And yes, of course you can unlock him to play in arcade and exhibition mode. He's actually called Master, and he's extremely difficult and kind of cheap if we're being real. This is an extremely addicting game that I've 100%ed more than once. Even if you don't like tennis, seriously, you should give this one a try. Toy Commander is one of the most unique games in this video. I have memories of my mom buying this for me while we were grocery shopping at Walmart. And I took it home, I popped it in, and I had a blast playing this. There's a lot more content in this game than you might imagine just looking at it. The story to this one is actually pretty epic. You play as a young boy named Andrew, and he got a lot of cool modern toys, and his older toys are really pissed off about it. This game plays exactly how we used to imagine playing with our toys back in the day. You can control fighter jets, helicopters, tanks, and trucks, and they're all equipped with missiles and bombs and other weapons like that. This game takes place entirely in one house. You get the attic, the cellar, the kids' bedrooms, the parents' bedroom, and even in the kitchen. Each level has different missions that must be completed before you can move on to another room in the house. The boss of each level is one of your old toys that has been replaced by your new toys. It's a super unique concept, and I've always really liked it a lot. However, I don't know why Andrew decided to toss Sir Alderac the 13th aside. He's a total badass flying android creature. I mean, can you imagine having this as a toy in 1999? Screw flying airplanes, I want this dude, he's awesome. Yeah, the game is damned hard, and it'll take you learning pretty much every level pretty well if you expect to beat it without cheats. There's a ton of different variety of playstyles in each mission. Some are racing levels, others are random tasks like simply destroying this Godzilla doll that's dressed as a rabbit. This game doesn't even try to be serious, but at times the music is like something that would be in a blockbuster 90s action movie, and I just love it. It's so cool. This is also a multiplayer game, and I imagine it's going to be really fun to try this one out with 3 of your friends. Toy Commander is still pretty affordable if you're looking to add a new game to your Dreamcast collection. Some of my best gaming memories are with the Dreamcast, and this one was definitely one of those. So heads up to all you parents out there. If you buy your kid a game at Walmart, they'll remember it for the rest of their life and make a YouTube video out of it. Thanks, Mom. If you're watching this video, then I would hope that you've heard of this franchise, but if not, you're in for a hell of a treat. Soulcalibur is by far the best fighting game on the system, and it's also likely one of the best looking games on the system too. This is a perfect example of the Dreamcast bringing the arcade experience home, and you can choose from several fighters that are all equipped with different weapons. You've got slow characters that hit hard, and faster characters that don't hit as hard, but they're also kind of an easy target too. It's really fun to try out the arcade mode with a new fighter just to see if they fit your playing style. Siegfried is by far my favorite character in the game, but Sophitia is a close second. This is one of those fighting games that has a dedicated block button, and I've heard several people complain about how they don't like those types of games. Honestly though, I think the block button is there because of the 8-way movement that's in this game. If you're good, you can completely run around your opponent and stab them in the back, and I really kind of like that strategy in a fighting game. That being said, somebody could still make it through the arcade mode just by button mashing. I had played 3D fighting games before, but none of them really caught me like Soulcalibur did. When I was much younger, I took my Dreamcast over to my friend Jonathan's house to play this with him, and he whooped my ass 20-0. And after that, I swore I would get much better at this game. I took it home, and I learned all of the moves on all my favorite characters, and now I'd like to think that I'm actually pretty good at Soulcalibur. As of the making of this video, there are 6 mainline games, and this is still one of the best games in the series. I think my personal favorite would probably be Soulcalibur 4, but this one is a very close second. Dead or Alive 2 and Soulcalibur are the best fighting games on the Sega Dreamcast, and I challenge you to prove me otherwise. You can't.
Siegfried versus Inferno. Battle 1, fight!
Rez is an on-rail shooter that was released in Europe and Japan, but unfortunately we didn't get it here in the States. Graphically, there's no other game like this on the Dreamcast, and the gameplay is really addicting. The wireframe looking visuals get more intense as you play, as does the music. It's really trippy to say the least. There are 10 levels per stage, and at the end of each stage you get to fight a boss, and there are a total of 4 stages. You get to lock on to multiple enemies at once by holding the A button, or you can tap the A button on each individual enemy, but I really highly recommend not doing that unless you want to get a game over very quickly. This one is all about managing a bunch of enemies on screen at once, and holding the button, hovering it over these enemies, and then letting go is the way to play this game. There are a ton of power-ups hidden in these levels, and if you're quick about it, you can level up your character to take more than one hit before you die, and that's probably going to be a necessity in the later levels of this game. This one can be really intense, but somehow oddly relaxing at the same time. If you're decent at rail shooters, you know, like Star Fox 64 or Panzer Dragoon, this one's gonna tickle your fancy. Rumor has it that the developers of this game designed this one to be played with psychedelic drugs, and I could definitely see that. There's a VR game on the PlayStation 4 called Rez Infinite, and I haven't had the chance to play that one yet, but I hear it's really good, and I'm kind of excited to check it out one day. Sega really liked weird stuff like this, and honestly, it's one of the many reasons why I'm such a fan of the company. Life is too short for the same old Mario game again and again and again. You know, I'll take stuff like this over Nintendo stuff any day of the week. Have you guys played this one before? Here's a puzzle game for you on the Dreamcast. Well, kinda. Mr. Driller is exactly what it sounds like. You've got blocks below you that must be broken with a drill in order to make it to the bottom of the screen where the finish line is. In addition to worrying about blocks falling on your head and killing you, you've got suffocation to worry about as well. These little air bubbles are scattered throughout the board, and you've got to use strategy to grab them before you run out of air, all while trying not to get squished. This game is a lot harder than it looks, and it'll take you a minute to get used to the strategy. You can't waste too much time thinking about your next move though, or else you'll run out of oxygen. There's both a beginner and an expert mode in this game, and although it isn't even close to my favorite Dreamcast game, I still like pulling this one off the shelf to play it every now and again. It's a pretty nice departure from RPGs or fighting games. I'm not particularly good at it, but I really do like it, and I need to spend more time with it so I can beat it. I'm really happy to have this one in my Dreamcast collection. What's your favorite puzzle game on the Dreamcast? Here we have an arcadey multiplayer dogfighting game. Propeller Arena was technically finished, but it was never released. The reason is pretty obvious. It was slated for release 10 days after September the 11th, 2001, and there is a New York style skyscraper level. And yeah, you can definitely crash your plane into the buildings. You know, that's really unfortunate because this game is a ton of fun. It was supposed to be fully equipped to be played online too. I haven't played this one online or even locally with friends, but I've had a good time with it in the arcade mode by myself. There's a ton of power-ups that you can grab, and it controls pretty good. My only complaint is the constant jibber-jabbering of your pilot as you play. There seems to be only like 4 or 5 voice lines per pilot, and they feel the need to talk quite a bit. Every time you shoot another plane, it seems like your pilot has to comment on it. The arenas aren't too big, but they're not tiny either. I mean, these graphics are pretty good for the time, and I think this one would have been a really popular one if it had been released. If a certain historical event didn't take place, that is. This game has a pretty good early 2000s soundtrack that definitely fits the gameplay, and if you haven't tried this one out on the Dreamcast, you definitely should. This is a fun game to play every now and then. Do you like Diablo and other dungeon crawlers? Yeah, I do too. This is a Diablo clone through and through, but it's based on an anime of the same name that I haven't checked out yet. The story is pretty typical. It's an evil dude trying to take over, and a wizard has summoned you out of your grave once again to save the world. Does any of that matter? With games like this, it's all about the gameplay, and it's pretty good. It's a little clunky compared to Diablo, but the Dreamcast controller is utilized pretty well in this game. You can level up your character and equip different gear throughout the game, as well as upgrade it to your liking, and it's nowhere near as detailed as Diablo in both graphics and leveling up, but you know, I kind of like that. A more simple Diablo isn't necessarily a bad thing in my eyes. You've got healing potions on the right side of the screen, and you have to use the D-pad to select them and then press the Y button to use them. This can kind of be a little nerve-wracking at times, especially if you have a used healing potion and you're getting overwhelmed with enemies and you're trying to move down to select another one that hasn't been used yet. There have been several times that I've died just because I couldn't get to the D-pad quick enough to switch over to a potion that hasn't been consumed already. But honestly, that's kind of a minor complaint. Other than that, it controls pretty well. The game gets pretty tough later on, and truth be told, I'm still stuck on this boss battle here. I've come really close, but I still wasn't able to beat him while I was capturing footage for you guys. I'm sorry. If you're looking for a good RPG on the Dreamcast that isn't turn-based, you should definitely try out Record of Lotus War.
In the 50 years since the War of the Demons, you always refused to become involved in history. Does this mean that you've had a change of heart? Surely you already know, but this is like turning a broken wheel.
I shall not respond to this.
Dynamite Cop is kind of a sequel to a Die Hard themed beat 'em up that was on the Sega Saturn, and I'm pretty sure it was on the PS1. This is one of many arcade ports that are on the Sega Dreamcast. The main character is very obviously Bruce Willis. The entire game takes place on this ship in the middle of the ocean that's been hijacked. 3D beat 'em ups are honestly kind of hit or miss, but I really do like this one. The controls are a bit slow, but I wouldn't call them unresponsive. You can punch, kick, jump, and even shoot your enemies with machine guns, and you can find a ton of power-ups, healing items, and weapons scattered throughout the floor. But you'll need to use a bit of strategy to pick them up sometimes. Enemies don't care that you're trying to pick them up, and they'll try to damage you when your back is turned. Once you start the level, you get an option of how you want to enter the level, and that's actually kind of cool. Every fight takes place in a small room, and once you clear the room, you get to move on to the next one. Sometimes there are quick time events, and if you don't press the right button in time, then you'll have to fight more enemies. I love how destructive the environment is and the fact that you can pretty much use anything in that room as a weapon. One annoying thing is that right after every enemy has been defeated, you only have a few seconds to get the items that you want on the floor before the level moves on. I wish it was delayed just a little bit longer so you could pick up some more stuff, because I've missed pretty much everything that I wanted to grab before it was time to go to the next area. This game does not take itself seriously at all, and I really dig that. It's not the best beat 'em up out there, but it's a Dreamcast exclusive, and it's actually really fun.
And there you have it. Those are some Dreamcast games I feel as though you should probably check out if you're interested in the system. Let me know what your favorite Dreamcast games are in the comment section below. I'm sure there's a lot of people that did not have their favorite game mentioned here, and that's totally fine. That's what the comment section is for. You know, I play a lot of retro video game music on my channel here, so if something like that interests you, I highly encourage you to check it out. You might find something that you really enjoy. And I've also got several other videos all about the Sega Dreamcast, including those about the GDMU, the Terra Onion mode, and all sorts of other different stuff, peripherals and all that good stuff. So if you wanted to check that out, I really appreciate that as well. Thanks so much for watching this video. Thank you so much for subscribing, and I'll catch you guys at the next video. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.